Yes, it's cast iron, but it's not to the point of where they have absolute control over the Houthis and what they do. Certainly the Houthis have many of their own reasons for doing what they're doing. And while the US and the UK don't want an escalation, and Iran may want some limited escalation, the Houthis are not afraid of escalation at this point. And I think, even if Iran may want the Houthis to limit their response to all of this, the Houthis will be quite keen to do their own thing, and these kind of attacks are only going to galvanize them and radicalize them as well. So I think the Houthis are really not in fear of any type of escalation at this point.
One more from me, and then I'll gladly bring my guest to ask you a question. Obviously, there is still a war going on in Yemen. You mentioned the Saudis. There have been attempts to arrive at some kind of peace deal. Where does that stand now, do you think?
It's in the kind of status of pause at the moment. It hasn't been scrapped entirely because of what's been going on, and the Saudis are really very keen to get that deal done and at least sort of have a ceremony to say that they are now no longer part of the conflict in Yemen. That had been sort of in the offing over the last 6 months, and then because of the October 7th attack by Hamas, it really put everything on hold. And I think the Saudis are now well aware that this could be an almost permanent hold if these strikes and retaliations keep going on. I think that the US Special Envoy is due to be sort of trying to go to the region and revitalize those discussions in the coming weeks, and I think the Saudis will be very keen to try and get the Houthis to sign a deal before this extends too much further, and they've got no chance of doing so with the Houthis using their leverage over Saudi Arabia in any peace deal with these strikes. So yes, that really hangs in balance at the moment, and I think Saudi Arabia will be very keen to push forward as quickly as possible on it if they can.
Questioned your thoughts in the studio. David Robert Grimes, in your mind.
It's interesting for me. I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and I'm kind of curious. Are Saudi more interested in the optics of this at the moment and the risk of it being overshadowed by other conflicts in the world, or is there a genuine rooted desire for a peace that is stable? It's hard to tell, for me anyway.
I think really with the Saudis at the moment, it's extracting themselves from the conflict, and obviously more long-term is back any further strikes by the Houthis into Saudi territory, which had been the real concern for Saudi Arabia with their plans and their economic plans. The 2030 vision for them could all be in jeopardy if the Houthis are still firing ballistic missiles into Saudi Arabia, which had been happening up until 2022. So for them, it's about extracting themselves from the conflict and ensuring the Houthis aren't attacking them directly. And I think it's a very much looking after themselves at the moment in that context, and therefore not wanting to antagonize the Houthis. They've been very muted in their statements even about what's happened with the US and the UK strikes in the last 48 hours. And the last thing do is antagonize the Houthis by being seen to openly support these kind of attacks at the moment.
Like everybody else, I'm concerned about the escalation of the war. Just wondering such strikes and the possibility with such a strike would increase such possibility.
I know it's interesting to get some sense from you on that, because everybody involved seems to be saying, no, we don't want it to escalate, yet we watch it kind of escalating, don't we? So where does that take us?
Yeah, I think that's the issue here. Nobody wants escalation with a caveat. I think the Houthis are the only ones that don't mind too much about an escalation. They've been bombed for 7 years, they've been repeatedly sanctioned, they've been blockaded, and they have a lot less to lose. This is working to their benefit, really, all of this activity. I think as far as what's happening in the Red Sea and the impact on commercial shipping, of that kind of escalating the impact on it, I think we only have to look what's happened in the last 24 hours, really, and more ships have started diverting. So the commercial response to all of this has been quite strong, as their concern grows about us seeing an extended disruption now of going through the Red Sea. Obviously, regionally, there is a huge concern that this could escalate. I think, as I mentioned, even as well, but of course, they have other allies in the region that could also step in, and there have already, before all of this, been many attacks ongoing by the Iraqi militias against American bases in that part of the region. You've got the ongoing between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon, and those are all other areas that are still of concern. But I think those groups are more aware of what extension of